Have you ever wanted to make a coat but was intimidated by all the stitching and all the sewing? Well, you won't have to worry about it with this pattern. Stay tuned for the entire video and I'll take the mystery out of creating this cool hooded jacket. If this is your very first time here, I teach easy to follow crochet patterns that can turn the average crocheter into an expert. And if you want to up your crochet game, I release new patterns every single week. So make sure you subscribe and click that notification bell so you're always up to date. This pattern works up pretty quickly due to the granny stitch. And the stitches that we'll be using today are the chain stitch and a double crochet. This tutorial pattern is work for a size medium-large, but I'll give pattern suggestions throughout the video for smaller and larger sizes. And you can help support this channel by downloading the PDF pattern for sizes small through extra large. I'll leave a link down in the description box below. The materials we'll be using for this tutorial will be 2 to 3 skeins of Caron 1 Pound and 1 to 2 skeins of Lion Brand Homespun yarn, and we'll be using a 6.5mm crochet hook. We're going to begin by making the body. We're going to be making 2 separate pieces. Okay, we're going to be using our 6.5mm crochet hook and our worsted yarn for the body. We're going to start by making a slip stitch. Not a slip stitch, but a slip knot. And once you have your slip knot, we're going to chain 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we're going to slip stitch into the very first chain to form a ring. And chain 3. 1, 2, and 3. Your chain 3 counts as a double crochet from here on out. We're going to place 2 more double crochet into the ring. 1 and 2. Your 3 double crochets together will be called a DC cluster or cluster from here on out in the video. So now we're going to chain 2. 1, 2. You're always going to chain 2 on a corner. We're going to place another DC cluster right into the ring. 1, 2, and 3. Once again, chain 2, 1, 2, because it's the corner, and place another DC cluster into the ring. 1, 2, and 3, and chain 2. We're going to continue this sequence 3 more times. You'll have a total of 6 DC clusters into your ring. So you can pause your video here and I'll meet you at the end of your row. Okay, we've made it back around and I've completed my last chain 2. At this point you should have 6 double crochet clusters within the very first ring. Alright, once you get that complete, you're going to slip stitch into the top of your chain 3 stitch. 1, 2, 3, and place a slip stitch. Now you're going to slip stitch into the next 3 stitches. 1, 2, 3. Your third stitch should leave you in your chain 2 space. So now to begin your next row, we're going to chain 3. 1, 2, 3, and we're going to place 2 more double crochets into the very same space. 1 and 2. And we're going to treat this like any other granny square, but since it has extra sides, we're going to place another group of double crochet cluster into the very same space. So now we're going to chain 2 to create that corner. 1, 2, and place your cluster into the same space. 1, 2, and 3. Chain 1 for your side. Now we're going to work the next corner. Place a DC cluster into the next chain 2 space. 1, 2, 3, chain 2 because it's the corner. 1, 2, place another DC cluster into the very same space. 1, 2, and 3. Since we're on the side, we're going to chain 1, and we're going to work the same pattern all the way around. In each corner, you're going to place a DC cluster, chain 2, DC cluster into the very same space, followed by a chain 1 on your side, and you're going to work the next corner the same way again. DC cluster, chain 2, DC cluster into the very same space. So you can pause your video here, and I'll meet you at the end of this row. Okay, we've made it back around. You might notice your work is starting to be a little bit wiggly, but that's okay. And now we already completed our chain 1, and we're going to slip stitch into the top of your chain 3 stitch. And just like your previous row, we're going to slip stitch into the next 3 stitches. 1, 2, and 3. And you'll be starting in your chain 2 space, which is your corner. And now we're going to chain 3. 1, 2, 3. Like I said before, this is work just like any other granny square, where you're going to place a cluster, chain 2 cluster in each one of your corner spaces, and just a regular cluster into your chain 1 spaces. So we'll start that now. So place 2 more double crochet into the very same space. 1 and 2. Since this is a corner, chain 2. 1, 2, cluster into the very same space. 1, 2, and 3. Now we're going to be working on the side of our work right here where there's a chain 1 space. Chain 1 because it's the side, and place a singular DC cluster into the previous row's chain 1 space. 1, 2, and 3. Chain 1 because it's the side. Now we're working into the corner where we're going to do a cluster, chain 2 cluster. So let's do our first cluster. 1, 2, 3, chain 2 because it's the corner, cluster into the very same space. 1, 2, and 3, chain 1 because we're working on the side next, and we're going to place a singular DC cluster into the previous row's chain 1 space. 1, 2, and 3. Chain 1 because it's the side. Okay, we're going to complete this exact sequence all the way around by placing your DC cluster, chain 2 DC cluster on each one of your corners, and in all of your chain 1 spaces, placing 1 cluster inside of that. So pause your video here, continue this sequence, and I'll meet you at the other side. Okay, we've made it back around to the other side. Oh, I forgot my chain 1 because it's the side of our work. And slip stitch into the top of your chain 3 stitch. And just like before, we're going to slip stitch over to the next 3 stitches. 1, 2, 3. So you'll start in your chain 2 space. And we're just going to repeat the same sequence that we did for the previous row until you reach the size of the top that you would like. For mine, I'll leave the number of how many rows I completed right down below at the bottom of the screen. And you'll know your pattern is working up correctly when you fold your work in half, or you take one corner and one opposing corner and fold it over, and it is shaped like a little L. Once your pattern is worked bigger, this will eventually be much bigger than this. Well, this will be the top part, the shoulder seam, and this will be the opening of your jacket. So complete your additional rows, and I'll meet you when you get there. To get their custom fit for small or extra large, you're going to fold your work in half and place it on your body to see if it covers more than half of your front and half of your back. Remember, the larger your size, the wider your sleeves will be. Once you complete your piece, your work is going to look a little bit wobbly. So right now, I want your work first facing the right side, facing up. We're going to fold our piece into the shape to create the sleeve and the body of our work. So it's kind of hard to see from this camera angle, but you're going to go take one of your corners and take the exact opposing corner and fold those two together. And once you fold them together, you'll create a little L shape. You might have to try this a couple times to get this correct. But by doing this, folding it this way with the right side facing up and folding it over, now you'll be sewing your work together and everything's already facing the wrong side out. So we can start sewing our pieces together. We're going to position our two pieces together and we're going to sew up the back side of your work. Okay, people always ask me how I sew this stuff together. So I'm going to show you how I'm sewing the back together. Right now we're working on that very back seam. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to, I don't know what stitch this is called, a whip stitch, or I'm just going back and forth through my work. Sorry, I have a long tail for sewing. Here we go, and I just keep going back through, matching stitch for stitch. Or if you find it easier, you can do a slip stitch all the way across. Some people don't like to sew, but I like the way the stitch looks when I do it by hand. Alright, since you've seen my stitch, which is nothing special, continue placing stitching all the way up your work, and then also complete your shoulder seams. I'll show you how to do those. Okay, we've completed our seam and made it to the top of your work, and now we're going to move on to the shoulders areas over this way. So I'm going to pause the video here and adjust the camera for a better angle. Next, you're going to flip your work over and we're going to be working across the shoulder seam. So this is the back part that we just stitched, and here's the part of your arm. So I already attached the yarn to the needle, and what we're going to do, let me zoom in a little bit for you. We're just going to sew all the way across the top. Like I said, no special stitches. I just match each stitch for each stitch all the way across. Like I said, if you choose to slip stitch, you can go do that. But continue placing stitches all the way across, and I'm going to stop placing stitches about 3 granny square blocks over. So my last stitch is going to be right here. So 1, 2, 3, the end of your fourth, or the beginning, whatever way you say, granny stitch over. So pause your video here, continue stitching your front and back piece closed until you make it until the end of your stitch before the last fourth cluster. Sorry if that sounds confusing. Okay. Okay, I made it to the other side of the work, and like I said, I stopped my last stitch, 1, 2, 3, on a fourth cluster over at the very end, and you can fasten off your work from there. And after this, we're going to be moving down to the bottom part of your work, down below here, and we're going to be adding more rows of your granny square clusters or your DC clusters. So I'm going to pause the video, I'm going to rotate this my garment, and I'm going to give you a better view of what I'm going to be working on. Part 2, we'll be working on the bottom part of your coat. Turn your work upside down. You can turn your garment upside down, so you'll be working on the bottom of your coat. And what we're going to do, we're going to attach the new yarn into the chain 2 space. Like so. And we are going to chain 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Your chain 4 will count as a double crochet and a chain 1. And we're going to place a double crochet cluster into the next chain 1 space over here. So place 3 double crochets. 1, 2, and 3. And chain 1. Place another double crochet cluster to the next space. 1, 2, 3, and chain 1. We're going to do that all the way across your work until we make it into the very center part of our work, and I'll meet you there. So pause your video. Okay, we made it to that center seam where your clusters don't line up as perfectly as it did before, but what we're just going to do from your last cluster that you've seen, chain 1, and just skip over this section right here and cluster in the very next space. 1, 2, and 3. Alright, we're just going to continue placing a chain 1 cluster all the way until you make it to the other end, and we will do that very last stitch together. So pause your video here. Okay, we've made it to the other side, and we're going to chain 1. And in your very last space, this chain 2 space, we're going to place 1 double crochet. 1. Now we're going to chain 3. 1, 2, 3. And we're going to turn our work. But I'm going to pause the video because it's quite a big hassle for me to turn my big piece of work right now. So pause right there. I'm going to turn my work. Okay, I turned my work and I'm back into position. This first chain 3 counts as a double crochet. We're going to put another DC cluster into the very first chain 1 space. So that's 3. 1, 2, and 3. So at your end, it'll look like you'll have 4. Alright, we're going to chain 1, and once again, we're going to place a DC cluster in each one of your previous chain 1 stitches. So pause your video here and complete this row by chaining 1, cluster, chain 1 all the way across. And I'll meet you at the other side and we'll work the very last stitch together. We've made it to the other side, and we're going to place 4 double crochets into the last chain 4 space. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And like before, I'm going to chain 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and turn my work. We're just going to repeat the last 2 rows over and over for an additional 15 more rows. So you should have a total of 17 rows. I'll leave a timestamp below on the pattern repeat for these last 2 rows so you know how to work them. Alright, now we're going to be working on a sleeve area. So what you're going to do, you're going to take a new piece of yarn and you're going to attach it to any one of your chain 1 spaces. I just tied mine on. And we're going to begin by chaining 3. 1, 2, 3. Once again, your chain 3 does count as a double crochet. Now place 2 more double crochets back into the ring. Not into the ring, but this chain 1 space. 1, 2. And that counts as your beginning double crochet cluster. And chain 1. And just like before, we're going to chain 1, DC cluster in each one of your previous rows, chain 1 space, all the way around. So chain 1 cluster, all the way around. So pause your video here and I'll meet you back at the other side. Okay, we've made it back to the other side and I've already chained 1. And I'm going to slip stitch into the very first chain, top of your chain 3 stitch. 1, 2, 3, slip stitch. And I'm going to slip stitch into the next 3 stitches. So 1, 2, and your 3rd stitch will be into your chain 1, 3. And we're going to start our double crochet clusters all over again with a chain 3. 1, 2, 3, 2 double crochets back into the same space. 1, and 2, and we're going to chain 1, and we're going to DC cluster in the next space, chain 1, DC cluster in the next space, all the way around until you make it back to the other side again. So you can pause your video here and I'll meet you back at the other side. Okay, we've made it back around, and once again we're going to slip stitch into the top of your chain 3 stitch. Okay, we're going to repeat this row for an additional 10 more rows. And remember, to start off your row, we're going to slip stitch across until you make it into your chain 1 space. So you can pause your video here and you complete your additional 10 more rows. Or if your arms are shorter, you won't need to add 10 more rows. Make it accordingly to your arm length. Okay, we completed our additional rows for our sleeve. So now all you have to do is fasten off. So I'm just going to slip stitch into the very first top of your chain 3 stitch. And I like mine to be a little bit more secure because I don't like the way my chain 3 and a slip stitch look. So I'm going to do a little extra slip stitch and fasten off your work. Next, we're going to put a border around this part with the homespun yarn. So we're going to attach that. I like to attach it to the very underneath of my work where the armpit would be, so you won't be able to see the seam as much. It's probably hard for you to tell exactly where mine is. It's getting a little bit hard to film because the top is getting extremely big. Alright, so let's take your homespun yarn, attach it to any one of your double crochets. And chain 3. 1, 2, 3. Your chain 3 will count as a double crochet. And double crochet into each and every one of your stitches, all the way across. Even when you make it to your chain 1 space, place another double crochet right in there. So pause your video here, continue placing 1 double crochet in each stitch all the way across, and I'll meet you at the other side. Once you make it back around, you're going to slip stitch into the top of your chain 3 stitch. I know it's going to be a little bit difficult to see using this homespun yarn. There we go. Oops, I left my loop too big. And slip stitch to join. Once again, you're going to chain 3. 1, 2, and 3. We're going to place 1/2 double crochet in each stitch all the way around until you make it to the other side. But like I said, I know it's a little bit difficult to see these stitches, and the little trick that I do, I like to place my finger in between the stitch so I'm able to see the next stitch, like so. Once again, place my finger between the stitch, then place another double crochet. Okay, just pause your video here, continue placing double crochets all the way around your work for just 1 more row, this one here, and slip stitch to join, and then we'll just move on to the very next step after your sleeve is done. Part 4 is the hood. Okay, what you're looking at right now is the collar of your work. I know it's kind of hard to see exactly what it is. Right here is the shoulder sleeve and part of the sleeve, and this is the front of your jacket that opens and closes that works the way around the neck. So what we're going to do, we're going to take this, the very corner part of your work where you have 2 double crochet clusters into the very same space. We're going to attach your yarn right there. Like I said, it's very hard for me to show you a better angle since my jacket is starting to work up pretty big. Alright, attach your yarn. And we are going to begin with a chain 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Your chain 4 counts as a double crochet and a chain 1. We've already worked this stitch before, but I'll show you how to do it again. We're going to place a double crochet cluster into the next chain 1 space. 1, 2, and 3. Chain 1. We're going to chain 1 DC cluster all the way around the collar of your work until you make it to the other corner with your 2 double crochet clusters in it, and I'll work that stitch with you there. Alright, so pause your video. Okay, we've made it to the other side of your collar of your hood. So I'm going to place my chain 1, And in this chain 2 space where you have the corner of your 2 double crochet clusters, we're going to place 1 double crochet, like so. And now we're going to chain 3. 1, 2, 3, and turn your work. I have to pause my video so I can turn my work off camera. 1 second. Okay, we have our work turned. So what we're going to do now, we're going to place 3 double crochets into the very first chain 1 space, a double crochet cluster. 1, 2, and 3. It's going to look like you have 4 double crochets here at the end of your work. Once again, we're going to chain 1 and place a cluster in each one of your chain 1 spaces. So you can pause your video here and continue to chain 1 cluster, chain 1 cluster, all the way till you make it to the very end of your work, and we'll work that last stitch together. We've made it to the end of the row, and don't forget to chain 1. And we're going to place 4 double crochets into the chain 4 space. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Alright, this is going to be a 2-row pattern repeat. And like the row before this, we're going to chain 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Alright, we're going to repeat the last 2 rows for an additional 20 rows to build up your hood. I'll leave a timestamp below on where to begin your 2-row pattern repeat. Once all your rows are completed for your hood, I want you to turn your work inside out and fold your hood in half. And we're going to begin to do a slip stitch up the top of your hood. So I still have the extra yarn left over. And I'm just going to go in through the front and go in through the matching back and slip stitch into the front, into the back, and slip stitch. Make sure you slip stitch loosely so your work won't be bunched up. And slip stitch. Continue placing, you can pause your video here, continue placing slip stitch all the way across until you make it to the end of your hood. Okay, what you're looking at right now is the bottom of your coat, and this is the opening and closing opening of your coat right here. What we're going to do now is going to apply a border going alongside the bottom of your coat, all around the edging of your hood and back down. I would show you the whole thing, but it's getting a little bit difficult to show you the project because it is so huge. Alright, so let's start putting the border onto your coat. What I'm going to do, I'm just going to attach my homespun yarn down to the bottom of my work. And what we're going to do, we're going to evenly space double crochets all the way around the edging of your work. Make sure you weave in your ends as you go. You can chain 3, which counts as a double crochet, and continue evenly spacing double crochets all the way alongside the border of your work. Okay, you can pause your video here, and we're going to do 2 rows of double crochet alongside the border. So like I said, pause your video here, continue placing double crochets all the way alongside the border of your opening of your coat, all the way around the hood and back down again. Alright, and I'll meet you when you make it to the other side of your 2 border rows. Here's what it looks like with your 2 rows of double crochet. Okay, what you're looking at right now is the very bottom of your coat. And what I'm going to do lastly, that I'm not going to put on film, I am going to make 2 rows of double crochets to go along the very bottom of the coat. So it'll be just like you did for the opening of your coat. You're going to do the same thing for the bottom. You're going to make 2 rows of double crochet all the way around the bottom of your coat. Alright, you can pause your video here and weave in all your ends and you'll see what it looks like all completed. If you have any suggestions for new videos, put it down in the comment box below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, and check out my other crochet sweaters and all my other tutorials. I'll see you guys on the next video.